Welcome back to the DuPont Collaboration Series. Still with me in studio, Paul Schickler, President of DuPont Pioneer, Lindy Struble, Manager for Economic Intelligence and Finance at Agribusiness Chamber of South Africa, Dr. Norman Mawashe, Program Manager for the Agricultural Research Council, and of course joining us from our bureau in Abuja, Nigeria, Larry Umuna, Country Manager for Global Alliance for Improved Nutrition in Nigeria. Paul, I'll throw it straight to you. We're getting into the discussion around technology and the impact that will have on food security. So very simply right now, tell us what we mean by technology. I mean, what does that cover broadly, and what role does it play in food security?
Well, first of all, this is interesting because science and technology, if you look at other areas of the world where science and technology has made a very, very positive impact, communication, transportation, health, very huge impacts and very well received by the population. When you shift to agriculture and food production, sometimes there's a little bit of hesitation around the role that science and technology can play. But I think what we need to be comfortable with is thinking of science and technology in a real broad sense, all the way from improved seed to the availability of inputs that can make the seed production more productive, the availability of credit, extension, training, agronomic advice is hugely important. You can have the best seed in the world and the best inputs, the availability of the inputs, but if you don't have the knowledge and the training to use them to their fullest capability, then those inputs don't become as valuable as otherwise they could. So I would encourage us to think in terms of technology in the broad sense of things. And so let me give you some examples, starting from the basic. You can utilize technology, agronomic expertise in no-till practices to keep organic matter in the ground, water preservation in the ground, just by changing your tilling methods using a no-till practice. That's very simple and very easy for instance, for a smallholder farmer to practice. Another example, using native trait breeding. We have a project, DuPont Pioneer has a project in Africa in partnership with CIMMYT out of Kenya to take a look at maize varieties that are already utilizing nutrients in the soil effectively. And then together in this collaboration, we're bringing molecular breeding technologies to bring up the yield level. So then you have a combination of products that are already natively adapted to the environment in Africa, utilizing nutrients that are very effective, and then bringing through advanced science some enhanced yield capability. That's a great collaboration that DuPont Pioneer has with CARI as well as CIMMYT in Kenya. But then you take it one step further, advanced technology, something like biotechnology. We talked earlier about nutrition. Again, DuPont Pioneer, in collaboration with many organizations like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the Howard Buffett Foundation, Africa Harvest in Nairobi, is working on bringing enhanced biofortification to sorghum, which again provides diversity among diets, but it will provide added levels of zinc, iron, protein, as well as additional levels of vitamin A. All of those nutrients are deficient today, particularly in youth during their developmental period. So if we can, through science, add to the nutritional capability of sorghum, that's a great outcome. So I think, like I said, we need to sort of broaden our view of science all the way from how we can use training and agronomic practices like cultivation, all the way to the most modern sciences to enhance nutrition to solve some of these challenges.
Lindy, when you're talking about genetically modified specifically, we know that there of course has been a lot of resistance from certain groups. People fear what it means when you're tampering with the genetic makeup of plant species or food. What type of acceptance is it getting in Africa from governments?
In actual fact, Samantha, there's only 3 countries in South Africa, in Africa, that allows GM technologies, and that's very sad. There's a lot of misunderstanding about GMs, a lot of or hidden agendas driven when there's policy negotiations regarding GMs, market protection, especially from the EU influence in that regard. So there's really some ground that should be broke in getting common understanding on GM technologies, that you won't have that negative effect. Of course, it has to go along with research on the environmental impact and those type of things. That's a given. But if you have that in place, you shouldn't be resistant to GM technologies, especially considering the benefit in a region, in a continent where we have so much malnutrition and a lack of, we call the African productivity a 1 ton hectare region. Whereas in advanced areas where technology is in that specific, let's say maize or corn production, you'll have 10 tons a hectare. Africa, we talk of 1 ton a hectare. And a large contribution thereof, it's not the only contribution, large contributions because we don't use better cultivars, and which could imply GM technologies.
I mean, does GM always fit when you're talking about, you know, better seeds, and when you're talking about that, is that always necessarily GM?
No. Norman made a very good point earlier about the need to adapt science and agricultural development to the local conditions. And that's a philosophy that we follow everywhere in the world, whether it is here in South Africa or in Zambia or in the United States. We can bring science to solve some of the world's greatest problems, but you still need to adapt that science locally to the environment. So making sure that the cultivars are adapted to the local soil conditions, the local weather conditions, and you can only do that by doing the research locally. But then you need to take that one step farther and work with the communities, work with the growers, work with the smallholder farmers, so that you can take those locally adapted cultivars and make sure that the smallholder farmers understand how to use those cultivars to their fullest potential.
Sounds like quite an expensive exercise and quite resource intensive. Does it still make good business sense to be focusing then on Africa from DuPont's perspective?
Well, it is. You know, it's a long-term venture, but we're in this for the long term. We're a long-term science-oriented organization, but we're investing because we see real opportunity to bring solutions to all the countries here in Africa through the investment. Just in the last year, we've made meaningful investments in South Africa here through the acquisition of the PNAR organization, and that will come with it investment in research and investment in smallholder farmers. We made investments in Zambia, Ethiopia, even with the challenges that are going on in Egypt, we're investing there. So yes, you need to have the stomach to invest and also do it for the long term, but I think that the opportunities and the contributions that you will make to society are worth it.
Norman, let's talk about what you're working on right now, a specific area of focus from you from the ARC's perspective when it comes to technologies that are applicable to Africa, and of course dealing with the issue of improving food and crop yields.
Yeah, at the Agricultural Research Council we do a whole range of research in order to address the issue of food security in Africa. My specific area of focus is livestock. I apply my trade there. We have a number of technologies that we are using. I will mention just a few here. The real issue with livestock in Africa is that by and large, we don't have structured breeding programs. And that leads to a situation where we are breeding with animals that are not best for the particular condition. So at the ARC, we offer a few technologies to farmers. The first technology that we are offering to the farmers as a routine service, it's we are using DNA profiling technology in order to determine the parentage of offspring. This is very much important for structured breeding. You need to know who are the parents, so that the records that are collected on the animals can be used to better assess the genetic value of these animals.
Yeah.
So they start breeders in the countries, they send in the blood sample or hair sample to the ARC, we process them and send them the results. These results are required when they register their animals for start breeding. We are also using the same technology to combat stock theft together with the South African Police Service. Stock theft is a major problem in South Africa. Most of the farmers are leaving business because they are more or less farming for somebody else. So the idea there is that when we have these DNA profiles on the animals, whenever an animal is stolen and a sample is retrieved from the crime scene, that can be compared with what we have in the laboratory and determine if it's the same animal. So with the application of this technology, we have seen some improvement in that stock theft is becoming less and less. So that is one area that is very critical. But of course, the challenge is always with regard to the cost that is involved. These kind of technologies, we would want them to be available to farmers at very much reasonable costs. But the challenge is always that they are sometimes a bit expensive. This is where we need to do a lot of research, not only to adapt the technologies, but in order to be able to make them cost effective for our kind of conditions.
Larry, the last one is around the environment, because we've got rapidly urbanizing countries right now across Africa. Can our environment support commercial, large-scale farming? Your thoughts on that?
Okay. Basically, in the last few years, we have seen an increased focus on the issues of climate. I think there's been greater call, a stronger call for climate-sensitive agriculture. We know that in places like Kenya, for example, there's the PESI instrument that is being used to provide farmers with information, real-time information on information around climatic issues, drought information. And most farmers, most development agencies and agric extension workers are beginning to also include issues to do with environment into their discussions. Now, the large-scale farmers themselves have also now been faced with with some level of sensitivity. They are being made to ensure that whatever they do, they think about the impact of their actions on the environment. But there's still a lot of work to be done there. There's still issues to do with the cost of ensuring the same level and standards as you would have in the developed countries, but we think we are moving in the right direction.
Well, let's open this up to the floor, of course, and I'm sure our audience has some questions that they'd like to ask our panel. So, if anyone like to start out, great. If you could just stand up, state your name and where you're from.
My name is Jimmy Nair, and I am from Johannesburg, South Africa. And I have a question for Paul Schickler. Paul, as we see today, the world population is around 7 billion people, and the projections are by 2050, the total world population will go up by 2 billion people. Of the 2 billion, 1 billion are going to be added in Africa. So clearly the food security issue is not something that could be tackled by one individual or one organization or even by one government. So in your opinion, who are the stakeholders who need to come together to tackle this issue?
Well, Jimmy, you've described very well the challenge that we face. Food security is an important issue, but when you look at Africa and the fact that we're going to be adding 1 billion people over the next 30 or 40 years, that just increases the challenge that is in front of us. And the result is, no one can solve these challenges by themselves. That's why it's so important for a company like DuPont to work with others. And when I say work with others, it's across the board. It is with governments, particularly areas like the Ministry of Agriculture of various countries, academic institutions, other companies. We need to bring our science that we develop together with other companies as they develop their own solutions and combine them. Local communities. Also, NGOs are a very important part of this. So an example is right here in South Africa, where we've committed over the next 5 years to invest 20 million rand into Limpopo. And we're going to do that together with a number of different organizations in collaboration so that we can work over that period of time to bring 250,000 hectares, a lot of that being farmed by smallholder farmers, from low levels of production, subsistence, into a better situation where they can care for their family and also have excess to sell to the local community in the markets. But again, the only way that's going to be done is working with others.
Great. Well, let's throw it to anyone else in the audience.
Thank you. My name is Pamela from South Africa. So we've talked about a couple of issues today. We talked about women. We talked about planning at a very small scale or very short term because people just don't have access. And it's normally access to things like credit, capital, access to information, access to markets, and post-harvest losses. We learned that $4 billion is being lost because food is not reaching the markets. What I want to ask Paul is enough being done in terms of collaboration through the value chain? And are there examples that we can cite? If you think about a country like Ethiopia, the kind of work we are doing in Ethiopia, can that be done elsewhere? Can that be replicated? Is enough really being done to address the issues that are known to everybody as issues in Africa?
Well, you've heard from my comments today that I remain optimistic. We do have challenges, but I do remain optimistic. And part of that is how things have changed over the last 10 or 20 years. 10 or 20 years ago, there was a tremendous amount of resistance for NGOs to do their thing, governments to do their thing, and private companies to do their thing, and not a lot of discussion occurring. More recently, over the last 5 or 10 years, a lot of discussion that collaboration is important. Now you come to today, and now there's a lot of examples of very strong collaborations that do exist. So we've moved from separation to agreeing that solving these problems is going to require collaboration to today that there are some very good examples of that occurring. But my concern is we've got to bring much more players into collaboration and increase the scale. A lot of small projects are good, even the one that I mentioned in Limpopo. That's going to be good. We've got examples around the world where we have small projects that are contributing good. We need to bring scale to these if we're going to solve the problem.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to bring up. It's good to make progress, and it's good that it's moving in the right direction, but is it moving quickly enough? Because we know that by 2050, we're going to have 9 billion people in the world, and we need agricultural production to increase by 70% from the levels they are at now. And of course, Africa, we know the population growing quite quickly, changes in disposable income. So what are your thoughts on that, Lindy, when it comes to making sure we progress quickly enough?
Ultimately, they say a well-fed person has many problems. A hungry person has one. And that is where if we don't really make a contribution in food production towards feeding the 9 billion people in a couple of years, we will have political instability, grabbing on quick wins in terms of economic policy, but this will all be unsustainable because you won't have an environment that is stable. Paul mentioned a lot of, many times about democratic stability in countries. And in Africa that is still a sensitive point, and whether we have that, and if we have, like I said, hungry people, it will add to the problems and it will add to economic instability.
Yeah. You want to add anything there, Norman?
Yeah, I think making sure that everybody is fed properly it's an important challenge. The biggest problem that we have had in Africa over time is in terms of our planning, the way we plan. We come up with ideas and impose them. That is why this doesn't become sustainable. I think what we need to be thinking more about is providing an enabling environment from government, from anybody else. We need to provide an enabling environment, and an individual will be able to prosper in that kind of a setup. We have been teaching people how to do things. I think that is not the way to go. People know what to do. What is needed is to provide an enabling environment. Planning at such a high level, not involving the people that are supposed to be doing the job, creates a problem because there's no ownership.
Yeah.
All we're thinking about is that there's a new guy here, we may make a few cents here and there. And when he leaves, we must think about the next guy who will come around. But if we just create an environment and let the people be the ones that run these processes, I think we'll be able to make a lot of progress. That is where the indigenous knowledge system can come into the picture, because if you look at Africa, this is probably the most challenging place that you can ever find in the world, meaning that the people there must also have evolved strategies to be able to deal with the challenges. So if we take away that from them, they become dependent and they will always lag behind.
Yeah. You bring a very important point there, of course, about also in farmers' perception, even if you're just talking about new technologies. Let's go to the floor again. Anyone else with another question?
Hi, my name is Carl Moyo. I'm from South Africa. And my question is also maybe to Larry, building up on the point that has just been talked about right now. Quite a lot of times we sit there as government, as private companies, as NGOs, and other organizations, and we talk about the problems that are there and the solutions that are needed. I think a lot of that has happened. Technologies are now available. We kind of know what the problems are, but to what extent are we involving, to Norman's point, how do we get voice of farmer? Voice of the one who needs. Even Larry maybe can come in, how do we get them to really adapt to those new nutrition methods that will solve their challenges. And I was at the World Economic Forum a few years ago, and a lot of educated people were debating about the problems. Then finally someone had the sense to ask a farmer and say, what is your problem? And the farmer said, I know where to get my fertilizers from. I know I've got good seed. I've got good production, actually. My productivity is up. My only problem is getting to market, and getting to market at the right time so I can get the right price. So the question that I'm just asking is, what kind of
Information
approaches
sharing.
can we adapt so that we get better traction at farmer level for adoption, but that we also get the voice of farmer to understand what is really their challenges, so that in them adapting this new technology that's available.
Yeah.
I heard that, Mr. Moyo. I think the first thing that we need to do is to actually make the farmer understand that we appreciate his or her role as a business. The farming has to be seen as a business, not a charity or a hopeless situation. And that means that we need to move away from just making policies that are located in files and government offices, to truly going to the community and engaging with them, understanding what their real needs are, understanding what the problems are, and giving them an opportunity to even join you in preferring solutions, practical solutions that would help them get their products, get the right productivity, get the right yield, and create access to markets for them. That means that we also need to begin to look at how we help them mobilize themselves into cooperatives, functional cooperatives, where they are taught business planning, they are taught the basics of production, they are taught about nutrition, and they are taught about economics. That's very important, that those cooperatives should be done and supported in such a way that they create a sense of ownership amongst the farmers themselves. Citizen engagement is very important. The use of technologies as well. We need to be able to think global but act local, which means, like the other speakers have said, we need to find ways of ensuring that we are able to adapt whatever new technologies we have to be relevant to the farmers. And finally, I think we also need to be able to ensure that whatever new investments that come into agriculture or to farming in particular are done in such a way that it recognizes local peculiarities, it creates access to new products, it creates access to, it creates an opportunity for new and young farmers to come on board. Young people should not leave the village rural setup because of their disdain for farming. They should be able to be attracted to it because they see a career and a profession out of it. And which is what the Global Alliance for Improved Nutrition is doing through its Marketplace for Nutritious Foods program. Today we are launching that program in Tanzania. And that's an incubator program that helps with knowledge sharing, helps with training, and helps with access to finance.
Well, Larry, it certainly does sound like we're making positive steps forward. That's what you've been reiterating. We've got 1 minute left of the show. I just want to get a closing statement from all of you in a studio here with me. I'll start off with you, Paul.
Okay, well, thank you. You know, we've talked a lot about the past and the current challenges, but talk about the future. Look to the future and see what, if we're successful in addressing these issues, what the future might look like. And if I look to the future based upon the efforts that are being driven today, I would see women flourishing and having a much greater role and success in agriculture. I'd see youth returning, just exactly what Larry just said, looking at the opportunity in agriculture and food as a business opportunity, so therefore they're engaged and returning to the rural environment.
Yeah.
I'd look at smallholder farmers as being successful, large-scale collaborations being the norm and always being done, and then as a result, investment occurring by private companies, governments, into agriculture development. If those things occur, I think food security in the next 20 or 30 years would be very, very bright.
I hope that's the outcome. We've got, as I say, a short time left, but Lindy, from your side?
I think the ultimate, if you implement this technology, what we need is more production, obviously. This will lead to lower prices. But the ideal world will be increased farm income. Now, you would think anybody would actually consider lower prices won't lead to higher farm income. But with efficiencies and efficient utilization of the right technologies, you can get to it, because your production cost will most probably lower, and with your higher volumes, your farm income will will increase, even if you had the lower prices.
Yeah. And Norman, your side?
From my side, I think a lot of emphasis should go into human capacity development. I think we do have all the resources that we need. But what we need a human resource that is able to execute at such a high and efficient level. I think that is where we need to put a lot of emphasis in. And if we look at the challenges, I think most of these challenges, we were part of the challenges. And we are more likely to be the ones that are going to provide better solutions. I think we need to work very hard in trying to boost our own confidence, because I think Africa has everything that is needed to solve the problems that are here. We just need to have a little more confidence and be able to use the existing resources and the knowledge that is there, because I think that is the one that is going to give us solutions. Because I think it's about right kind of investments.
And of course the solutions all come from up here in Africa, and we have to tap into the minds that we do have on the ground. Thank you so much for joining us today. Appreciate your time. We've come to the end of this month's edition of DuPont Collaboration Series. Thanks of course to my guests, Paul Schickler, Lindy Struble, Norman Maiwashe, and from Abuja, Larry Umuna, and of course from myself, Samantha Loring. Until next time, it's goodbye.